A very good morning to you all. You are all very welcome to today's event in conversation with Paul Healy, Chief Executive of Skillnet Ireland. My name is Noelle O'Connell and I'm the CEO of European Movement Ireland, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's discussion. So joining us is Paul Healy, who is the Chief Executive of Skillnet Ireland. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Skillnet Ireland, they're a business support agency of the government and responsible for advancing the competitiveness, the productivity and innovation of Irish business through enterprise-led work development. So a really ambitious and important agenda. And Skillnet currently supports over 21,000 businesses throughout Ireland and provides a huge range of valuable learning and training experiences to over 81,000 trainees. And delighted to be joined this morning by Paul, who is a very respected commentator in the area of talent development, education, labour market policy, human resource development and corporate governance. And he's also a member of the National Training Fund Industry Steering Group, the EU Commission Skills for Industry 2030 Policy Group, and the European Digital SME Alliance. And prior to his appointment as Chief Executive of Skillnet Ireland, he also had responsibility for OD and talent for a large multinational company. So we're delighted, Paul, to have you with us this morning, and a very warm welcome to you. And our conversation today with Paul takes place at a time when Europe cautiously, we hope, takes emerging steps from leaving behind COVID-19, but we face into another crisis, that of the crisis in Ukraine, and the challenge that it would bring to the world and to the EU. And it is the fore of all our thoughts, and we express our solidarity at this time against the backdrop of the unfolding tragedy with the people of Ukraine. But in terms of here in Ireland, there are a number of challenges which business face, which of course Skillnet Ireland is very actively working on to support businesses in Ireland to combat. But we have to look at the issues of course, the challenges from COVID-19, but also climate change, the digital transformation. And these issues will require businesses to be innovative, digitally advanced, and thoughtful and mindful of sustainability and the wider issues. So COVID-19 has very certainly disrupted life over the past 2 years, from the welfare of workers to mapping out supply chain operations and adapting new strategies. Businesses and SMEs in particular across the EU face many challenges. But with those challenges come new opportunities, and I look forward to exploring and getting Paul's insights into those as part of this morning's conversation. But also, we want to hear from you, our audience. So please do get involved in the Q&A session. Questions can be submitted to our events team at europeanmovement.ie, or using the hashtag, for those of you active on Twitter, at EMI events. And we'll make sure to put those to Paul. So Paul, a very warm welcome to you. I'm really pleased that we're having this conversation. As I mentioned to you in our prior discussions in a previous life, I had the honor of being a director on the board of Skillnets, and also worked as a network Skillnet manager for different organizations at different times. So I'm a long time advocate and champion for the Skillnet enterprise-led model. But perhaps you might outline to you, I suppose, tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization from your perspective as its chief executive, Paul, if I may.
Thank you, Noelle, and it's a great pleasure to be with you this morning and to talk to the audience here, to explain the work that we're involved with, how we're engaging on the skills and the talent agenda, and particularly how we're engaging across the EU in terms of our engagement at EU level across the EU priorities and the skills agenda and so on. And there's a lovely arc to this, Noelle, after all your work and your engagement with Skillnet over the years as a network manager and serving on our board. We find ourselves here today having this conversation. So there's a very nice resonance to it all. Maybe I'll just introduce the organization a little bit, so for any of our viewers who may not be familiar with Skillnet, just to give you a sense of it. So as Noelle outlined, we're a talent development agency of the Government of Ireland, and we're under the Department of Further and Higher Education. So our job is to boost the innovation, the productivity of the business sector here in Ireland. And we do that through talent development and through upskilling those who are already in employment. But to our core, Skillnet Ireland is a partnership organisation. We work through and with 73 industry partners, each of whom promotes its own distinct and special Skillnet network. And I want to give a warm welcome to our many colleagues from the Skillnet business networks who are with us and joining on this call and are always so supportive of events like this. So a warm welcome to all our colleagues from the networks. So of course, all of us recognize, how important upskilling is. We understand that it is vital to every country, but it takes on a whole new added significance when it comes to a country like Ireland. And why? Because we compete largely on the basis of our talent and on the basis of our people. So we have to give this rigorous attention, constant focus to ensure the workforce is at the leading edge in terms of skills and that we remain competitive, because that is our unique proposition as a country, is our people. So Skillnet networks are really leading the way on this and going about it in quite a distinct manner, Noel, what we like to call an enterprise-led way. And what does that look like? So we're enabling companies to themselves to determine what they need, to determine the skills gaps, to look at what their priorities are in terms of developing their business and developing their people. And then we work with each of our individual 73 Skillnet networks to put in place the programs that make all that happen and that address those gaps and build that skills base and that talent base and that type of innovation in businesses that we compete so well on. So yet again, everything that we do, driven by market need, driven by the needs of companies, and driven from the coalface itself. So as you said in the introduction, well, we expect to support 21,000 businesses this year. So that's a considerable reach right across the enterprise sector in Ireland. It's spanning both the large corporations, but also the small firms. So 85% of those 20,000 companies that we will support this year will either be small or micro firms. So really important that governments support that sector, that encourage and incentivize upskilling of those that work in small and medium-sized firms. But we're also developing talent right across the key sectors of the economy and also right across the regions too. And we've many partners right across the regions of Ireland and the Skillnets that are hosted there that are with us on the call here. So, we've a major presence in the FDI sector. By a considerable way, we're the largest provider of upskilling programs to Ireland's FDI sector. We have a major focus on digital skills development, on skills development for the sustainable economy, but also helping small business owners, medium-sized business owners to develop and grow themselves and to advance their businesses and boost their innovation. And we do that through management development and through mentoring of business owners. We're making really good progress against our strategy, having tripled our exchequer funding rather in the last 5 years, and that was no mean feat. It was quite a challenge. That, as I'm sure you'll understand.
I can empathise with that, Paul. Fair
You
play.
can empathise that, yeah. And we're getting there, making great progress with the support of our Minister Simon Harris and the department. So we expect to invest of the order of 18 million in Ireland's workforce this year. That's a record level for us, with about 25 million of that, Noel, coming from the private sector in the form of co-investment on our programs. So we're achieving really large scale.
That's fantastic, Paul, because I remember actually when I was on the board myself, I think the investment level was at 23 million. So, even in that time frame to see it at 80 million is fantastic. So great credit to you, your team, and to all the Skillnet Network family, I think, really, because they're really being key in driving the success of the program and the project. Paul, just to pick up, actually, you mentioned some of the really ambitious goals and objectives you have for this year. And I think it's one thing we touched upon about how the way we work and the future of work, it really has been turned on its head, Paul, hasn't it? And profoundly upended by the pandemic. And as we slowly navigate our way to, I think what people are saying is as the new normal, I mean, I'd be really interested in getting your views and thoughts on how we manage and map that talent recovery. Are there changes underway? Are we seeing innovations in upskilling? And wearing your Skillnet Ireland CEO hat, is, what does that mean for skills and the wider skills agenda in Ireland?
Yeah, I think to start off with, it's terrific to see a return to normality. But as you said, it's a new normal. It's a different normal, and we're engaging with work and we're engaging with skills in a different way than we did. So COVID has certainly upended things, but positive to see the workplaces beginning to fill up again. And even in our own organization, we're consulting with teams about what that will look like, and striking this balance between, the work and the life, and less about, I suppose, work-life balance, but more like work-life integration, because we shouldn't be trying to separate these two things. Our work lives and our home lives, really do intersect, and we should stop separating those. So, and I'd like just to reflect, on just very briefly in the last 2 years. And we're hugely proud of the work of the Skillnet networks over the past 2 years during the COVID crisis. They really stepped up. And Skillnet support was a lifeline, actually, to so many businesses in Ireland during the period, allowing them to keep trading, helping them to pivot, helping them to invest in digital, helping them to keep those doors open and to keep moving, right across the sectors, but particularly the customer-facing sector, which was most severely impacted, as we know, retail, hospitality, leisure, fitness, the arts, and so on. So we were heavily involved in all of those sectors through our Skillnet networks. So we're really proud of the contribution that we made to the national effort during that time. But just to the specifics of your question, Noel, if we look at how COVID has impacted on the employment model, for example. Yeah. So there was already a gap or a distance, if you like, emerging between the employer and the worker. And that was manifest through things like, the rise of the gig economy, the rise of contract working, self-employment, and so on. But what COVID has done really is further weakened those connections between employers and workers. And you see that. So you see that in this epidemic of the great resignation, as it's been called. You just look at the job market now and you see how fluid that has become, Noel. We see all of this rising vacancy rates right across the sectors. And then added to that is this rising global mobility of talent. So people are moving all around the globe. Why? Because, there is intense competition for talent. And plus to what you commented on at the beginning, Noel, is forced migrations as a result of terrible things that are happening in the world, like the tragic issues that we see in Ukraine and how that is playing out. So all of that taken together presents a lot of challenges for upskilling. So how do you develop the skills of those in employment when the actual employment model itself is becoming so disrupted and so fluid? And how do you build a culture of lifelong learning, where you have such flux and change happening around you?
Yeah, and actually on that point, Paul, did you see much of your networks? Did all that activity have to pivot online, presumably, or was it hybrid, or how did the networks kind of cope with the challenges imposed by the restrictions of the pandemic?
Yeah, so it was a 6-week period where all the programs that we offer, and in any given year, the somewhere the order of 6,000 programs are coordinated and delivered through Skillnet networks. All of those had to be re-engineered. All of those had to be migrated onto, digital learning, distance learning platforms, and so on. And a massive level of effort and massive shift went in a very condensed period of time by the Skillnet networks to make that happen. But I suppose it's not just that; it's the way that upskilling played such a key role during the pandemic. You might have thought that, employers would say, I can't engage in the training of teams and so on. But our experience was actually the opposite, because we engaged employers on this agenda to say, look, this is impacting on your business. One of the best ways that you can address this is through pivoting your business, is through exploring new opportunities, developing your business. And we will help you with that journey through the upskilling of the manager and the leader and so on themselves, but also bringing along the teams and helping them with new ways of working and the skills that are needed to seize new opportunities. So skills played a vital part in the whole pandemic, but in the post-pandemic world, we see real challenges to the upskilling agenda, to the employee engagement agenda, actually, in this context of the disruptive model that I've talked about.
And yeah, tell me a little bit about those challenges, Paul. Are you optimistic that we have the resilience to deal with those, or do you think that we're kind of entering into uncharted territory, really, aren't we? I mean, lockdown was one thing, and the total transition to the virtual world, but now we're in this transition phase of more of a hybrid model. And what do you see as some of those challenges emanating from that?
It's interesting when we talk to employers. They would say to us, hybrid presents difficulties, particularly operational difficulties, and how you coordinate a blended work environment. And typically they would say we prefer, an option that's it's all at work, or an option that it's all at remote. So hybrid brings with it difficulties, and a lot of those are in the operational and the coordination side. But if we look at our organization and what we're seeing, like, we continue to see unprecedented demand for Skillnet industry-led upskilling, despite all of that.
Yes.
So that's telling us that when you put the employers, companies themselves in control of the process, you allow them to determine, working with the Skillnet networks, what's needed. That model is hugely resilient, Noelle. That model is highly agile and can bend and twist to the various different demands as technology disrupts work and as big crises like COVID disrupts the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you, Paul, on that point. And it's great to hear that level of ambition and optimism, I think, because they're probably definitely on the optimism. It has been in somewhat short supply. So I'm really encouraged to hear your determination that we navigate to a new and a better normal on that aspect of things. Turning to the European agenda, if I might, just for a minute. I know, and credit to you and all your colleagues, that Skillnet Ireland has actually been recognised as an example of industry-led best practice at a European level in a number of areas. How do you see Skillnet Ireland influencing, if I can put it that way, influencing and leading on the wider EU skills agenda, and where do you see Skillnet Ireland navigating on that?
Yeah, so we're 2 years or so, Noelle, into our own EU engagement strategy, and you remember us talking together at the very start of that journey, Noelle, and you've been with us every step of the way since. So I suppose taking the lens out first, where do we see the EU skills priorities, manifested and represented? And that's, of course, in the EU skills agenda, which is the Commission's 5-year plan, really to raise the skill levels right across all member states. And it represents the EU's largest ever historical investment in skills. It's huge ambition, and it's hugely ambitious. And Ireland are a major recipient of the skills investment coming from the various different EU programs. So without getting into the detail of the plan, many of our viewers will be familiar with it, but there's 12 actions there, and it's what you could expect to see, focus on lifelong learning, focus on boosting STEM, on digital skills for the green economy, of course, but also more nuanced things like micro-credentialing is in there, and particularly how to unlock greater investment in skills, like we see through Skillnet Ireland, which is public-private sort of approach to unlocking investment in skills. So as we look at this, and we've studied it hard, out of those 12 actions in the European skills agenda, we're in near perfect alignment with 9 of those. So we see ourselves, playing a very considerable role at an Ireland level, but also at an EU level in supporting the EU skills agenda. As you said, we've been identified in multiple EU reports and research, have cited Skillnet Ireland in that industry-led, enterprise-led model to upskilling as a best practice. And we're very, very proud of those outcomes that we've achieved, and those outcomes that have been achieved by our networks in being referenced and framed and put out there as an example to other member states. So we see ourselves making a large contribution to the EU skills strategy as we move forward over the next 5 years.
Fantastic, Paul. And look, I'd like to commend you on that and encourage you to keep going with that, because I think a big part of our role here in European Movement Ireland is to support organizations, businesses, enterprises, bodies who are all about championing and promoting greater Irish involvement and engagement at all levels in Europe and at an EU level. So it's fantastic to see to see Skillnet Ireland being an exemplar in that flying the green flag, if I can put it that way. So congratulations, and great to see that. And I mean, if we move on, aligning that European aspect, and I think you touched upon in one of your earlier remarks, you talked about matching talent and the regional growth agenda. And, if we bring it down and kind of reconcile the European and the local and the regional, where do you see the alignment of those priorities and those synergies? Because I know that Skillnet is really proud of its justifiable track record of being not just a Dublin-centric focus. It's across the country, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I'd be happy if I could give the audience just a quick sense of how that works, and how you see that sort of regional spread, and how the programs are aligned and so on. And look, without getting overly technical, the broadly EU programs, as we know, fall into two kind of high-level categories. You have the major, country-led programs, such as the ESF is a really good example, Brexit Adjustment Reserve. They're coordinated locally by departments and agencies in the given jurisdiction, Ireland, obviously, in our case. And then, of course, you have the Brussels-led programs, which are really about collaboration, really about joining together actors across the European community. And typically they're on consortia basis. And I might just take firstly the large country-led schemes, which are hugely important to an organisation like ours, which is a big sectoral dimension to what we do, but also a big regional dimension. So we've carved out a very substantial participation opportunity in the Brexit Adjustment Reserve, Noel, and what that's all about is mitigating the impact of Brexit, particularly on the domestic sector and in the regions, border counties, and among the small firms in particular, and in the locally traded sector, which of course have borne the brunt of the impact of Brexit. So it's a 22 million package that's been awarded to Skillnet Ireland, 11 million in this year, under the estimates this year. So how we're doing that is we're engaging with the medium, small size companies, locally traded sector, to see, okay, how can we help you on your digital journey? How can we help you on your innovation? How can we help invest in you as a business owner and manager, so you can pivot your business, you can adjust to the impact of Brexit, you can carve out new markets, you can carve out new supply chains, and so on. So the BAR, or Brexit Adjustment Reserve, is a really good example of a program that gets right down into the regions, right down into an SME level. The other major country-led program that we're leading on, and in terms of a participation opportunity, is the ESF, or the ESF Plus, and we're in an advanced stage in terms of that application. And ESF is quite a broad church, as we know. You have major emphasis in there, of course, on digitalisation and digital skills, but we're also leading on, for example, women returnships, boosting women in STEM participation, women in tech, and so on. And that's all framed within our ESF application. And hopefully we'll see a good outcome on that in the coming weeks.
Keeping fingers crossed for you, Paul, on that.
Fingers crossed. I might quickly just reference, Noel, some of the Brussels-led schemes that we're also involved with. And look, I suppose we've used the various different EU forums that we've been engaged with over the last couple of years to obviously raise our profile at the EU level, but plus our membership of the European movement has been massively helpful for us to kind of raise our standing and our profile. But we're also members of the European SME Alliance, where my colleague Mark Jordan is the Ireland rep. And through that, we're getting to know like-minded organizations who are interested in, developing skills around the digital, around sustainability, and so on. And we feel we can bring a lot of value to the Brussels-led programs. So two quick examples, one being the European Digital Innovation Hubs. We're really excited about this, Noel. Essentially what these will do is help the small firms, yet again in the regions, develop their digital transformation and to look at how they can adopt and benefit from automation, advanced manufacturing, AI, but also how they might make themselves resilient in terms of cyber. So Skillnet Ireland is part of the application for all 4 of the digital innovation hubs that are earmarked for Ireland. And the role that we play there is as the talent partner, the skills partner, and we expect to see the hubs operational in the second half of this year. So a really exciting time. And just to look at another Brussels-led scheme that we're involved with in the program, And it's in this whole domain of hydrogen technology. And this is supported through Erasmus funding. You might be picking this up, and as I've investigated this myself, hydrogen fuel has huge possibilities in terms of climate action and supporting climate action. And the EU estimate that by 2050, a quarter of all our energy needs will be sourced from hydrogen. So this is something that we want to be involved with. And there's a major skills gap if we're to achieve these sort of targets. So Skillnet Ireland, we've joined a large pan-European consortium, which includes lots of Irish actors, NUI, GEA are in there. And of course, a shout out to our own Green Tech Skillnet, who again are going to be the talent partners. So yet again, we're working with these consortia, targeting these areas that we can really contribute and where we've a really distinct contribution to make.
It's fantastic, Paul, to listen to you and to learn. Like, I'm even picking things up of that ambition and that innovation and that cutting edge, really, isn't it? I mean, when you mentioned there about digitalisation, I have and thank you for very kind words supporting of European Movement Ireland. We're delighted to have you as one of our members and our champions, as I said. But in terms of the digitalisation, my other hat is I've the honour of being appointed by the government through an open competitive process, I might just add that in, of being Ireland's national citizen representative to the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I'm a member of the Digital Transformation Working Group. So a lot of what you mentioned are these topics and opportunities that we're trying to grapple with and come up with recommendations from right across citizens, across the 27 member states, members of the national parliaments, members of the European parliaments, led with the Commission, the Council, the European Parliament, and bring together in a cogent, distilled fashion recommendations, and particularly on digitalisation, Paul. I was really interested in your views and your thoughts on that. We're seeing, I think I'm reading here, that 2/3 of Irish business expect to be using AI and automation by 2023. So how do you see Skillnet applying its expertise, its thought leadership, its market positioning in shaping Ireland's digital agenda? And what can you, I suppose, add to that so that I can bring that at a European level at this conference on the future of Europe over the coming months as we kind of bring it to its conclusion?
Yeah, look, I think at this point, all of us recognize that we're probably living in the era of the greatest tech disruption in humankind's history, right? And you might think that's a big, broad statement, but it's actually true. We are. And we understand too that COVID has sped all of this up and sped up the whole digitalization process. So we accept we are at this point, but often, this is framed as technology versus jobs conversation, and very quickly it gets very gloomy, So it's interesting just to give a counterpoint to some of this. So, if you look at some of the ILO research, they say through their research and large evidence base supporting what I'm going to say now, cited by the ILO, one tech job creates 5 indirect jobs. And if we look, for example, what's coming out of the World Economic Forum, they're saying the net outlook for jobs, despite all of this technological disruption, is in fact hugely positive. And there will be a surge in demand for middle-skilled and high-skilled jobs. And, so every tech wave that has landed always had 2 effects. The first was, it disrupted jobs were replaced by technology and so on. But it also unleashed huge amounts of growth, huge amounts of innovation. And if we step back and we say, okay, what unites both of those things? How do you mitigate the downside? How do you help people whose jobs have been impacted? And how do you seize upon the upside? How do you help people work amongst these new technologies and to thrive and to prosper? And what unites both of those, of course, is upskilling, is talent development. That really is the secret sauce in terms of embracing technology. And it has been down through the ages. And this latest tech wave, although it's massively disruptive, it presents enormous possibilities, and talent is a real uniter in terms of making that happen. And of course, we see this, and as you framed your question, we see this so well reflected at EU level, with digital probably up there, top 2 or 3 priorities for the Commission, I would say. And you'd have a view on that, Noel, no doubt. The EU Digital Decade, as they're calling it, as we're calling it, and associated targets. And we talk about the EU talks about the 4 cardinal points, or in plain English, the digital compass. It might be an easier analogy, which are, yet again, you expect these things: 1, digital skills, digital transformation of business, secure and sustainable digital, and lastly, the digitalization of government, or e-government and public services. And we see that reflected at home through our own national digital strategy. And yet again, government need to be commended here. It is massively ambitious in its scale and in its scope, and it aims to position Ireland as a global digital leader. And yet again, it's based around those 4 cardinal points, if you like, of the digital compass. So just where are we with all of this? Okay, and where does Ireland stand? Before I get on, and perhaps mention just a couple of the specific areas that Skillnet Ireland are engaging around the skills and digital skills agenda. So the go-to place are the DESI rankings, as we know, the Digital Economy and Social Index that's produced by the EU, and that basically is tracking member states' progress against the digital agenda and digital skills. So really important metric. So the good news is, and many of our viewers will know this, Ireland are doing quite well. Okay, positive. Okay. But no room for complacency, Noelle. We can't, because of what I said earlier on. A competitive workforce, highly talented workforce, it's so important to us. So we're 5th of all 27 EU member states on the 2021 DESI report. So where are we going well? We're going well on the integration of digital in business. Very high scores, for example, on the use of e-commerce, which is very, very encouraging. And we're well above average in terms of advanced digital skills, and we should take a lot of encouragement from that. And of course, our deep tradition in higher education, which we're so good at in this country, and we produce big levels of ICT graduates. So we're doing very well on all of those hot buttons. Now, where are we falling behind, or not falling behind, but where are we in and around median or below median? Okay, number 1 is basic digital skills and digital literacy. And the issue here is a mind the gap issue, or a 2-tier sort of population, one with tons of advanced skills and really comfortable around technology and so on, and then everybody else. So we got to get ahead of that. Really important that we get ahead of that agenda. But we're also, for example, running really high vacancy rates in tech jobs. And the issue, of course, for us is we have to maintain a supply of tech, not just to our SMEs and our indigenous sector, but also to the multinational sector. And Skillnet Ireland plays a really, really important role in that, in supplying. And our Skillnet networks are wonderful at engaging with FDI companies and supplying those tech jobs. And even just one aspect, which is the EU Data Act. And we look at that as an opportunity that brings great opportunities to build digital infrastructure in businesses, what to do with data, the new goals, as we call it, and so on. And Skillnet is heavily involved in this agenda through our partners in the European SME Alliance, but plus our work that we've been doing, and our deep work we've been doing in terms of data science skills, in building data science capability and an upskilling around the data agenda.
Fantastic, Paul. That's brilliant. I was scribbling furiously, and you might be hearing some of those great thoughts and innovations that are taking place as putting forward Irish best practice to the conference on the future of Europe. So thank you for that. It's fantastic to hear that. And I'm delighted to see we've questions in from our audience, Paul. So I might take some of those if we may. So great to see our audience getting involved in the conversation. And just maybe following on, I might start off with Sophie Ball's question from DCU, because I think it sinks in very nicely with what you were speaking about there. And she is wondering if you are collaborating with any higher education institutions in any of your EU projects and networks.
Yes, so the first thing I'd say, Noelle, is there is an immense amount of collaboration happening between the higher education sector and Skillnet networks. And just to put a flavour to that, around 4,500 people participated in programs with higher education that were co-created with the Skillnet networks, and where there was a gap in provision before we started. Okay, so where nothing existed, Skillnet networks have engaged, particularly on new skills, emerging technology and skills, and so on, have engaged with the university sector to create these programs that are driven by market need, fulfilling a real gap in the market. So 4,500 people participated on those. One higher institution alone, I have to call them out, as TU Dublin, are responsible for a quarter of all of those. So we have exemplar higher education institutes that are working with our Skillnet networks, benefiting hugely, both parties benefiting hugely. So the Skillnets, what they do and do wonderfully well is they bring industry to the table, to the higher education institutes in almost a ready-made format. So, these deep roots, these deep tentacles that we have into the industry bodies and the member companies that sit within those industry bodies, where we can curate their requirements. We hear from the cold face around what's happening, what's coming over the horizon. We bring that into scope in terms of requirements gathering and so on, and then engage with the university sector to co-create these new programs. So I would say to Sophie to reach out to us. We've deep levels of engagement right across the university system, practically all the higher education institutes, and not forgetting the new technological universities, of course. Yes. We've deep roots there, and to reach out to us, Sophie, we'd love to talk to you.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, Sophie. Open invitation to get in touch with Paul and his team in Skillnet Ireland. And look, we do a lot of work ourselves with Sophie and colleagues in DCU, so it's fantastic to see that collaboration, Paul, as you outlined, between yourselves and the educational institutions. And then if we might move on, another great question here from Lawrence Carvalho from the Fingal Integration Forum. And they're wondering, is the training provided in the Irish education system for persons of disability, for example, autism, Down syndrome, intellectually challenged, to help them get informed using the learning by doing approach?
Yeah, and look, I suppose the first thing we'd all have to acknowledge is there's always more work that every education institution or agency that, including ourselves, can do to be more supportive and enhance the type of supports that we offer to those who have a disability, and some of the examples that you've cited there. It's not our specific domain. I think it's important that I say that. I'm clear to the viewers. There are other agencies of state who have those specific requirements within their mandate. But we are working across a number of various different priorities on those headings, and we're happy to talk to Lawrence around those if he wishes to reach out to us.
Fantastic. No, well, I think another, Paul, you're going to be very busy with all the engagement after this event. So that's fantastic, Lawrence. Great opportunity for you to get in touch with the Skillnet Ireland colleagues there. And moving on, Paul, if I may, a really prescient question from Gráinne Boyle of Positive to Work. And sadly, as we've seen, how can organizations, she's wondering, how can organizations in Ireland support refugees, particularly those from Ukraine, continue to deploy their skills in such challenging times? I think we're up at over 6,000 Ukrainian refugees in Ireland as of this morning, if I'm correct. What would you see as some of the methodology and the approaches that organizations like yourselves can support refugees deploying their skills?
Yeah. So look, I suppose we have to start this conversation by recognizing and acknowledging the massive human tragedy that's unfolding. And as the Taoiseach said on a BBC interview over the weekend, the largest displacement of people since the end of the Second World War. Just to put that in context, so. And we look at our own country, and without being self-regarding, the best of us is shining through here. If you look at where we are, I think you get the number there. I think we're up at 5,000 or above already. An anticipation of 80,000 Ukrainians will come to our shores, will be hosted here, will have access to employment and access to all the other state supports. So, but there are some real practical supports that we are already thinking of, and we're talking with our partners around these. So one example is, of course, career advisory and upskilling. So as somebody is trying to access employment in this country, which is the right as they come under the EU scheme, that is bringing Ukrainian refugees to our country, how might we help them, in the career advisory space, that they can engage in these opportunities and seize these opportunities through interviews and so on. So there's a whole career advisory aspect and an upskilling aspect. Like there are other dimensions, so Ukraine sits outside the European Union, as we know, and the European framework for recognition of qualifications. So for example, how do we build that bridge that makes it very easy for someone with professional qualification, like an engineer, like a lawyer, like someone from a medical background and so on, to engage really, really quickly in employment? And I know that's been considered at a government level as well. So, it's one thing showing the type of ambition that we're rightly showing, and we should be proud as a state of what we're doing there. But that brings with it a requirement for us to address some of these real practical things, so people can have sustainable, lives here that are fulfilling, and they can access employment. And those adjustments that are needed in terms of upskilling, career advisory, and so on are there for them.
Couldn't agree with you more, Paul, on that. I know, and thank you. And it's really reassuring to hear you outline that so succinctly. Moving on, we've a comment on a question from Helen Downs, Shan Chambers Skillnet. So Helen is saying that as a promoter, it is great to work with Skillnet Ireland. So nice to get a compliment, Paul, who have their finger on the pulse to support all sectors. The last 2 years have been massively challenging for businesses, but they have embraced the training being offered across the 70 plus networks. And her question is regarding digitisation. What is Skillnet Ireland hearing about? What are the biggest challenges when going digital?
Great, and thank you, Helen, for that question. And also just to acknowledge Grania, our fantastic promoter of the Positive Work Skillnet for the previous question. I think it might be helpful to just quickly expand, Noel, on some of the work that we're doing around the digital agenda, just to address Helen's question. So it's a huge part of what we do, and rightly so, because digital and technology is probably the greatest force that's impacting on skills and talent at the moment. There are many more, but this is the largest one without a doubt. And we're leading in many ways on the digital strategy and supporting the digitalisation strategy for Ireland. So just to put some numbers on that, we expect to support, or targeted to support, 16,000 people who will participate in technology programs through the Skillnet networks this year. So that's the type of scale that we're achieving, working with our partners, including Helen. We are by far, as I said, the largest provider of upskilling programs to the FDI sector, and a big focus on that, of course, is on technology. And just to give viewers a quick sense of how we're doing this. So there's two strands to it. Firstly, with our technology partners, technology associations in Dublin, but right across the regions as well, we have a major focus on the highly specialised digital skills. Are those associated well with the emerging technologies? Blockchain, of course, is there, AI, automation, Internet of Things, data science in particular, and cyber in particular. So we're doing a lot of work to distill up from companies what they need in the space, horizon scanning to make sure that the programs are there and that they're future-proofed. And then back to the higher education question that was asked earlier on. So a lot of what we've done is develop programs in concert with the higher education sector to meet future skill needs. A quick sample is Ireland's very first postgraduate offering in artificial intelligence was developed through Skillnet in collaboration with three universities. It didn't exist before our involvement, and now we're seeing upwards of 300-400 graduates every year passing through that program. So a massive talent boost in the AI field for a country like Ireland. So that's the first dimension of what we're doing in the digital. The second is helping smaller firms on their own digital transformation journey, which is really relevant and really prevalent for small firms now, who often struggle to know where to start. And that can vary from what we might call the basics, which is a good e-commerce suite, digital presence, online ordering, and so on, right up to things like complex automation, the manufacturing process, and the list goes on. So we're heavily engaged through our Skillnet networks right across the country and in the regions on how we help small and medium-sized firms on their own digital transformation journey.
Fantastic, Paul. Great answer to Helen's excellent question there. And then, Paul, another question we have here which is, I think, actually is really good. It's coming up with sorry, I think it's just moved there as I try to move back up. In the aftermath of COVID-19, what does Paul see as the biggest challenges and opportunities facing business in Ireland? And how long have you got, Paul? I'm sure you're wanting to respond to me with that. But yeah, if you could just maybe outline some of the challenges and opportunities that you see arising from the new normal.
Yeah, and look, it's a very, very broad question, and it makes you think. So, often one crisis gets replaced with another, or maybe one priority gets replaced with another. So, there was an intense focus on COVID for all the reasons, and we have to recall, of course, the tragedies of COVID, the people who lost their lives, and all the businesses that closed, and the effort that still goes on, and the legacy and the trauma that's there, that all will have to be dealt with and worked out over time. But if I was to think, we all might have seen that analogy of, the boxer in the ring, battling away with COVID, and on the sidelines of the ring, on the ropes, I think they call it, is climate change, ready to hop in for the next and the bigger battle. So it might be helpful just to talk a little bit about the sustainability agenda, Noelle, and you might have particular questions for me, but the question is, what's the next biggest priority, and it has to be this. Despite the crisis and everything that we see in Ukraine and the tragedy that's unfolding there, I suppose the larger sort of planetary crisis, if you like, of course, is climate change, because it's the one that guarantees everything else. If we don't get this right, we'll struggle with everything, and we'll struggle with every other priority and commitment that we have. And I think you mentioned this in your opening, and you have to commend yet again the ambition of the European Union, the European Green Deal.
Yeah.
It's so broad, and it is so pervasive. And it's a €1 trillion investment over the next decade. That's a big number to get your head around. So that's the scale and scope of the European commitment to this. But of course, it's been blended with just transition. That's there to support workers that have lost out, communities that have lost out, etc., as a result of climate action and the steps that we need to take. So really a balanced approach. And if I could turn just quickly to the skills dimension of all of it. And I think often we perhaps default to, when we hear about green skills, we often might default to, okay, that's about retrofit, that's about green construction, that's about waste management, recycling, and so on. And all of those are really, really important. And we often hear our minister talk about our need to really boot up the system and to produce huge amounts of graduates and people upskilled in all of those domains, and that's really important. But just as I was prepping for today, I came across a LinkedIn report that was commissioned with, yet again, a wide evidence base and a wide sample, and they actually identified 800 core green skills, and 300 related, what they call secondary green skills. So that is telling us there's a massive upskilling dimension to all this. There is a major talent development dimension to climate change and climate action. And in many ways, the scaffolding, to use that sort of metaphor, the scaffolding around climate action will be skills, it will be talent. And I just want to talk just really quickly, if I could, just about some of the work of our partners.
Please.
And really to commend the work of our partners. We're leading the way in skills development for the sustainable finance sector. In plain English, that's the greening of the financial system. All of the people that need to be trained and upskilled. The compliance people, the accountants, and everything, in order to have sustainable finance. And Ireland has a real shot at a global leadership position in sustainable finance. And we're doing a lot of work on that through Sustainable Finance Ireland and the Skillnet. Green tech is another key one, and we have a wonderful partnership in green tech on renewable industries, and the Green Tech Skillnet really leading the way on that. Clean water is another area where we've targeted, which yet again is a massive question, because water is becoming such an important resource and a scarcer resource. So how we manage it and our discipline around water will be so important. But one of the major areas of focus that we have is around building sustainability within small and medium-sized firms. And we're doing that through the Climate Ready Initiative and Central Solutions, who are our delivery partner. And what's that about? That's about working with small business owners to say, climate action is here. It presents challenges, but it presents an immense opportunity. There's a business case for a small business owner to engage in sustainable practices. Why? Because it saves costs. It makes the business more profitable. So if you're looking at your energy consumption and you're conserving water, you're conserving electricity, if you're looking at your supply chain management and your suppliers through a green lens, yet again, there's efficiencies and so on in there. So our Climate Ready initiative is achieving real reach. Several thousand companies are going to engage around this next year, and we want to build it out. And we have a 5 million investment program a 10 million rather investment program that government have committed to our Climate Ready initiative over the coming years. So every company has an opportunity, not just to I suppose, having to deal with the issues of climate change, but to reframe it. Every company has an opportunity to contribute to climate action, but also to benefit from it too. So I think, as we move forward, that's possibly the biggest priority, and it has to be.
Yeah.
As we move forward.
Yeah. And absolutely. And Paul, you managed with remarkable skill and eloquence to answer 3 of my questions there that the audience have posed in terms of the greener economy transition and sustainability, the climate agenda at a European level, as you said, the Green Deal, and how Skillnet Ireland is helping workers to access those skills and be ready to embrace the opportunities there. So well done. Thank you for that. You're making me redundant in my job as moderator and posing questions. But we have a great question in now, if I might turn, from David Brown. And David has just commented on that there is a lot of focus on AI, yet very little on IA, intelligence augmentation, which should be easier and less costly to implement. Is this widely seen, Paul?
Look, I have to confess, David, it's a little bit beyond my specialism. I'm aware of the term intelligence augmentation, but I can't claim to be an expert on it. I could talk about our focus on AI, which is being driven by a number of our partners, particularly Technology Ireland, but others as well. AI is going to be a massive enabler as we go forward. It has huge capabilities. But we have to also consider AI in terms of the ethics of it, and yet again, training and upskilling plays a huge role in this, in awareness building. And even if we take, for example, what we see around us in terms of this world of data, this world of artificial intelligence, the levels of disinformation, deepfakes, and so on. What we need to be really great at, all of us going forward, and it's a skill that we need to really develop, is independent thought. So what we see moving around us and these things that we see pop up, that we have to apply independent judgment each time, rather than taking it for fact, and so that's the whole ethical dimension of emerging tech, the whole ethical dimension of data, the ethical dimension of our artificial intelligence. It's going to be huge part of all our lives, and there's awareness building and an upskilling dimension to all of that.
And actually, yeah, it's a great point. And David, to follow on from that as well, Paul, I'm just back from Strasbourg, where this weekend's plenary on the Conference of Future of Europe, a big focus on that digital transformation working group was the whole idea and the importance of human-centric approach to all of this. So that's really coming out very strongly as a proposal and a recommendation from amongst the different panels on social, on jobs, on economy. So I think it ties, it links in very cogently with what you were outlining there. And then if we may, Paul, moving on, I know that Skillnet Ireland is developing some really innovative programs about around women and labour market participation, particularly in tech and in STEM. And obviously, given that, I think, was it last week? This week we have St. Patrick's Week, but last week it was International Women's Day. What are you do you want to outline maybe some of the innovations that Skillnet Ireland is leading on in this area?
Yeah, and I suppose, and just before I do that, I want to recognise the two very special people who have led on this. And one is Maura Hunt, director of the Digital Skillnet, and her colleague Catherine Cullen, doing wonderful work. And I suppose came up with the concept and implemented everything I'm about to tell you about. If we just look at the question of the tech sector and female representation in tech, so there's a couple of dimensions to this. First of all, we have a huge demand for unfulfilled vacancies in tech that you heard me talk about earlier on. Okay. The second is we have a massive talent pool of women who have taken career breaks for various different reasons and want to re-engage. And the last is we have an issue of gender bias in technology, which is a huge representation of men and not so much of women. And of course, this last dimension, which of course is female participation in STEM. So taking all of that together, Technology Ireland and other partners have been fantastic at addressing all three of those issues, and reaching out to women who have taken a break from the tech sector for various different reasons, boosting their confidence in the first instance to say, okay, yes, the tech sector may have moved on, but with the right sort of upskilling, the right sort of programs and so on, we will help you with those competence levels and bring you to a point where you feel you can fully engage in a fulfilled career in the tech sector, having taken a break. And I have to commend the companies that are working with us on this, Noelle. The likes of MasterCard, the likes of IBM, these are enlightened companies who are hosting placements for the women through the SkillNet program. So part of what we do is the upskilling, of course, the career advisory, but each one comes with a work placement, and the statistics speak for themselves. So 85% of the women that have engaged on these programs with us over the last 4 or 5 years that we're doing them have found full-time employment roles in the tech sector. So there's a great outcome for the women involved, but it's also a great impact for the tech sector and huge value in terms of the exchequer investment in getting people into employment and into the tax system and everything else that goes on. So we're very proud of the work that we're doing and the innovative nature of the work that we're doing for women in tech and returnships.
Fantastic, Paul, and that's really inspiring and so encouraging to hear that and so important. And your success metrics speak for themselves on that. So chapeau and bravo on that. Keep doing that is all I can say to you. Paul, I'm looking at the clock here, and one of the things that we try very hard to do at a European Movement Ireland in Conversation event is to keep to time, because I fully appreciate the demands on people's time and their busy schedules these days. But before I do my wrap-up concluding remarks, is there anything you want to say that we didn't touch upon? My goodness, we could be here for another hour fleshing out some of the fantastic topics that you spoke about in such detail. But is there anything else you maybe want to add to our audience, and before I thank them for their attention and engagement?
No, I think we've had a great conversation here, Noelle. I've enjoyed my time with you here. I hope what we've imparted here between the two of us has been beneficial to our audience. And we're a very open organisation. We're a collaborative organisation. What I'd say to anybody who's on this call, come to us with your ideas. If you have a proposal or an idea, approach our Skillnet networks, approach us. We're always open to new ideas and a new direction.
Well, listen, look, isn't that a fantastic way to draw proceedings from this morning's EM Ireland in Conversation with Paul Healy, Chief Executive of Skillnet Ireland, to a conclusion. Thank you so much, Paul, for outlining and engaging your views and your remarks on topics that no doubt we will be returning to. And I look forward to continuing our engagement and our conversation. And thank you for offering and being so open. I think it's really important to have that level of openness and engagement with people. So I'm sure if people log onto your website or get in touch with any of their local Skillnet network managers, they'll find an open door, either virtual or physical, or maybe even hybrid. But it's fantastic to see that level of engagement. And may I wish you and all the Skillnet community, of which I am a long-time advocate and champion of, continued success in the important work that you're doing. It's really, really great to see the growth and that trajectory and that level of ambition. And thank you for all your efforts. And thank you to Skillnet colleagues, my own EM Ireland colleagues, and to you, the audience, for tuning in today with your questions, your comments. Please do keep the conversation going. And until we meet again, hopefully at another EM Ireland event, a very good morning to you all. Take care. Thank you.